I'm Merrick Trommater. Thank you for listening to UK Cinema History. UK Cinema History. The Elephant Man. 1980. Directed by David Lynch, starring Anthony Hopkins and John Hurt. You chose this week's film, David Lynch's The Elephant Man, which means I get to kind of be the guest and put you in charge. So this is almost like a second week off for me because, of course, we had you do that for Sleuth last week.
Well, slightly. I will not be on the foreground that much, but yes, because I enjoyed thinking about that film a couple of months ago on the birthday of David Lynch. I'm a little bit. mm, I'm quite interested in revisiting that, and I have been watching the film again yesterday and today, recalling some of the moments that I find quite special. I think it's a. Um, I mean, I think there's hundreds of films that are special, old ones, new ones. I think the Zone of Interest, which is not even a year old, is from this year. I think it's a wonderful project, very well done, very and still very different in the approach taken. But this film, I really find it so so well done. So many aspects about the the different characters, the poetry behind it, the humanity, the criticism of the times, which actually I would have to contradict myself, is not criticism of the times, is criticism of humans. Um, it, the more I watch this film, the more I notice how intensely he's attacking what humans are, our attitude, our behavior, our arrogance, our superiority complex, and a few other things. So I look forward to this room to dive a little bit further into this film.
Excellent. It looks like we're going to have a small crowd today, but the two important ones are here, right? You and I.
I thought you meant Thomas and Kathy.
Yes, that's who I meant. You're absolutely correct. I keep forgetting the world doesn't revolve around me, but it would be better if it did.
No comment.
Well, why don't you get us started, and if people show up, we'll just catch them up.
Good. Then I will just go to some of my notes here. And I want to do what I did with the other room I did, namely to give a couple of details as to where this film is dealing with. And mostly because I think it's also one thing that I find quite interesting or important, because I find that it teaches us, or it teaches me, how much can we do, not just with art and creativity, but with the actual life. And as in this case, the the film is referring to a person of that really existed. His name was Joseph Merrick, or sometimes called John Merrick by, I don't know why, but his name was Joseph. I think he had a middle name. I can't remember his middle name right now. Born on August 5th, 1862, in Leicestershire, England, this figure man who, after a brief,
Sorry to interrupt, but great pronunciation. Everyone gets that wrong. Good job, Sila.
well, I must say, I did live in Boston for 3 years before moving to Europe, so that's how I know it is Worcester and not Worcester or things like that.
And Lester instead of Leicester.
Yeah. I also heard some British people tell me, oh, what's her name? It's a what's her first name? Warwick. What's the name of the famous um, singer? Dionne Warwick, and he was making fun of how Americans say Warwick, but it's actually Dionne Warwick. Anyway, so he was disfigured, and after a brief career as a professional freak, became a patient of London Hospital from 1886 until his death. Displays of the Elephant Man were part of the human curiosities movement of the 19th century that saw the exhibition of African slave Sarah Bartman and the rise of showman P.T. Barnum and carnival freak shows. Merrick was apparently normal until about the age of 5, when he began showing signs of a strange disorder that caused abnormal growth of much of his skin and bone. The size of his head increased 3 feet, almost 1 meter, in circumference, with spongy skin hanging from the back of his head and across his face. The disorder from which Merrick suffered was long thought to be an extremely severe case of neurofibromatosis. Neurofibromatosis. But these deformities were probably the result of an extremely rare disease known as Proteus syndrome. Merrick was confined to a workhouse at age 17, then escaped 4 years later to join a freak show in 1883. While on exhibition, he was discovered by a London physician, Frederick Treves, and admitted to London Hospital in 1886. A letter that was published in an unsuccessful effort to find Merrick's a hospital for chronic medical cases drew the attention of London society, which earned him a measure of fame and led to Merrick receiving visits from a number of prominent individuals, including Alexandra, Princess of Wales. He remained at London Hospital until, at the age of 27, he died in his sleep of accidental suffocation. One wonderful desire of Merrick was to sleep. Oh, okay. I bled into my own note. Um, so this is the one of the things that I haven't read it anywhere, but my calculation goes as follows. Well, one of the it actually is just one calculation, one suspicion. Um, I have quite a few other things to mention, but this in particular, when we see him towards the first half of the film, when he's getting acclimated in his room, um, he takes a glance at a couple of drawings, and one of the drawings shows a person sleeping like a regular person on the bed. To this, he says to the young nurse, I wish I could sleep like a regular person. Now, there seems to be good reason for him to have not slept like that. And once he became acquainted with his room and felt at home and reached the point of sleeping flat, because apparently, according to the film, many things led to him being able to do so. My calculation is that that's what killed him. I think biologically or anatomically, he was not supposed to sleep flat because of his skeleton, his condition, and I'm assuming that that is what really killed him, because he died of suffocation, as we just read, and because he was deformed, he was not healthy, but he was not sick, he was not ill, he was just deformed. So I think I will stop with that and allow you to give your first thoughts.
Well, I'm going to start with my childhood trauma with this film, which when I was 10 years old, being raised by an Anglophile father who'd done a study year in Oxford, myself and my twin brother were taken to this film in 1980. Uh, at the 99-cent local theater, the Sun Theater in Grand Ledge, Michigan, still there today, by the way. Um, and we were horrified out of our 10-year-old brains. Absolutely horrified by it. Not by his deformity, but by overall the soundtrack, the little slurping noises, the use of the music, the creepiness of it. And we were both just kind of like, oh my God, that was awful. I'm going to have nightmares, blah, blah, blah. You scarred us for life, Dad, blah, blah, blah. And then the Sun Theater would have a matinee every Sunday where they usually would run a kids film. And my dad dropped us off with the 99 cents for that, plus I think $1 for popcorn. And we stood in line, got our tickets, and we're sitting there. And instead of the kids' film that they normally would have run, which would have been like a re-release of a Disney or something like that, it was The Elephant Man. And so for the second time in a couple of days, we had to sit through this film that had just traumatized the hell out. But it was a great experience because, of course, then having been through that initial 10-year-old trauma, I could appreciate the film. And my brother and I both became absolutely obsessed with Joseph Merrick, his true story, the real Elephant Man. Our father bought us books by him about him, including the one that the doctor, played by Anthony Hopkins, had written, and another one that was written by the carnival barker, whom he um, had formed a partnership with. And Joseph Merrick became a very large part of our lives. And rewatching the film now, I feel like what both horrified me, and then 2 days later, I was able to suddenly enjoy, was that the fact that this was created as a work of, I don't want to use the word entertainment, but as a work of a artist attempting to make a work to appeal to people. And sometimes it's good to be scared, and sometimes it's good to be freaked out. And sometimes when you do that, it reveals things about yourself that you as a 10-year-old maybe can't deal with, but still need to. And so while the Elephant Man in the film had a horrifying appearance on that very first viewing, on that second viewing, the edges aren't so bad. But what I think Lynch created here is a classic example, as I've come to study cinema, and especially British cinema, of the exploitation film, the camp film. His inspirations were all Hammer horror. When you see the machinery of the industrial age, that's straight out of Hammer horror. That opening shot, the only dolly really in the film, and you see Anthony Hopkins' hat. When he removes the hat and turns around, I half expected to see Peter Cushing from one of the vampire or Frankenstein movies turn around, because it was so typical of Hammer horror. But not only that, the exploitation films of like queer cinema, such as Kenneth Anger in Scorpio Rising, and by using these techniques to tell this story and making us kind of voyeurs to it, I think he created a deeper work of art than a straightforward biopic could have been. I've actually seen the play that this is based on, and to me, it is mediocre because it simply is telling his life. And at the end of it, if you stand up and applaud, just like you stand up and the audience stands up and applauds at the theater when Merrick goes to visit John Merrick. He's called John Merrick in the film, and I'll get into the reasons why they had to do that in a minute. But who is that audience applauding? And who in the theater are you applauding? It's not John Merrick. What is he being applauded for? Living with with an extreme disability, being not almost hideous to look at to most people, surviving with great pain. No, they're applauding themselves for accepting him. And by creating the film this way, both David Lynch, who had a lot of control over this, and Mel Brooks, who if it had only been this film that he had produced, but he also did this when he hired David Cronenberg to make The Fly, so we know that this was on purpose. And there's also a story that I'll tell that really nails this down, are not allowing us off the hook. They will not allow us to stand there and applaud ourselves for accepting John Merrick while pretending to applaud John Merrick. He has made us a voyeur. He has put us into the type of exploitation and horror film, used all the genre tropes. For instance, you don't see his face for the first 15 minutes. What does that remind you of? The shark in Jaws. He has made him a monster. And the fact that you and I can then, at the end of the film, accept him for who he is. And why? Because he speaks well, because he can recite from the Bible, because he can sit and drink tea in polite society. What makes him any different than that darkened figure, or that figure that he is in front of that medical board, where he is just being used for public exploitation? And there's a class division here as well, because of course what is shown is the polite society accepting him, and the gruff kind of working class people not only being repelled by him but exploiting him for their own purposes, until he becomes famous. And then once he's famous, you see when he's kidnapped, which of course is a totally made up story, but works in the exploitation film that we are watching, works for plot reasons. Those people, those working class people, turn on his so-called owner, because of course this is John Merrick, or in the film John Merrick, the Elephant Man that they read about in the papers, and so he is no longer a version of exploitation. But I did have one other point. I've actually read the original screenplay before Lynch rewrote it. And I'm just having trouble remembering the two guys who wrote its name, but they are really known mostly for biopics, like they did the Sweet Dreams, Patsy Cline biopic. They did the Francis, and in it, it was told from mostly Merrick's point of view, and it had the theater owner, or the person who he partnered up with, as being rather kindly, and the abuse happening to him when he went to Europe. And it had a very interesting twist, which was the fact that London closed down these exploitation shows, had forced Merrick out of business, and he had to go to Europe in order to do that. And there he is beaten up and robbed by his European partner and has to make his way back. And Lynch takes all of that out, all of the subtlety out, because he is not interested in telling that story. He is interested in telling us what we are feeling as we are voyeurs in this. He is not interested in creating a biopic he of John/Joseph Merrick. He is interested in creating a biopic of our reaction to it. And I have a lot more to say. I did also want to note, because people who listen on Facebook can't see the comments, that Mary Bindi points out that modern day scientists believe that yeah, he had Proteus syndrome. So there's that. But yeah, but I think this is a great exploitation film. But I think it's great camp. But I don't think those are insults, because I think camp and exploitation are legitimate works of art, and I think this works as a very artful version of that. And I'll end my thoughts there.
Well, there's one trivia that I want to share, and that is that at the beginning of the film, we see Dr. Treves finding his way into this corner. It seems to me he doesn't really know what he's looking for. He's just curious. He follows a man who goes in there. And that's where we hear this alderman speaking to Bites, saying to him, this exhibit degrades everybody who sees it, as well as the poor creature himself. That person who says that, this alderman, that is Frederick Treves, the great nephew of Dr. Treves. So that's the only trivia I wanted to share, since Hi is not there to contribute with the trivia. But I'm also using that to mention that in my perspective, I think David Lynch is being very intentional with a lot of what he's doing to to sub to support your point, Eric. I mean, I don't know David Lynch, probably nowhere close to as much as you do. Understand his work, his the way he
I don't
organized.
think anybody knows or understands David Lynch's work, even David Lynch.
Yeah, that so I agree with that too. But I don't think it is just luck that he decides to use this person condemning what Bites is doing, that happens to be the great nephew of the Dr. Treves himself. So I think that's, for me, that's a sign of the intentionality, his purpose attacking or criticizing society, maybe in a different way that I would have done it. Maybe somebody else would have done more entertainment, somebody else would have done a lot more criticism. But the way I get Lynch, and I think about other films that he did, both more natural looking and more crazy looking, as The Straight Story as opposed to The Blue Velvet. Um, this is a very detailed study of what we do when we're glorifying ourselves. Some points are, I think, absolutely wonderful. Perhaps one of the, well, two of them I'll mention, which touch me a lot. And they, well, one is when Anne Croft, the society lady, the actress, comes in, and the the shot, the photography of this man deformed, the whole setting of the space, the room, and Anne Croft standing elegant to the other side. And he is, this ugly, deformed man is reading Romeo and Juliet. And then she breaks in reading Juliet's part, and they start going back and forth. I think even without the text, even without the the dialogue from the book or from the play, the the picturing, the way Lynch captures that, the topic and these two, and then of course the high point of her saying, "You're not an elephant man, you're Romeo." Um, the first time I saw it, I was very impressed with that. But the second time I saw the film, I was a lot more impressed with the details of what is really behind the human condition in the example of Anne, the wife of Treves, when she starts crying because of um,
He
Joseph.
mentions it because he mentions his mother.
Yes, when Joseph begins to talk about how much he has tried to be a good person, he wants to be good, and that his mother is proud of him, and that she should see him the way he is now, the way he's surrounded by good individuals now. He wants to be seen by her mother, by his mother, at this point. Um, that, I think, goes back in the sense of what humans do in their sick mind. In the same thing you said, that when they applaud in the theater, they're actually applauding themselves. And in this case, I'm pulled into thinking, why am I touched? Why is Anne Croft touched by listening to someone read Romeo and Juliet? Millions of people don't do that. Why is she touched? Why is Treves' wife touched because he wants to impress his mother? Millions of people want to impress their mothers. So there's something extra in there, and that is, in my view, we are surprising ourselves that we have misjudged something, and when we criticize it as ugly or not worthy, and then we suddenly are convinced that it is good, then we are crying, surprised that we missed the boat, and that we were so stupid to not see that before something nice happened. We could have seen a lot of quality in this individual without the romantic things of Romeo and Juliet.
And I'd like to drill into those two scenes for a moment. I know I sometimes get too hyper technical, so I'm going to rein that back a little bit. But they both have one thing in common, which is that as directed and edited, the drama of them is completely undercut. So, for instance, when Tree's wife starts crying, immediate fade to black, snap of your finger, fade to black. Which, if I were a film school instructor reading that in a screenplay, I would have told you can't do that. You have to drill into that scene. You have to talk in terms of the drama of that scene. And yet it works perfectly here because Lynch is not going to allow us to have that model in reconciliation between the two. He's not going to allow us to have that ability to. The action is over and we've moved on. He has made his point. The same with the scene with the actress who is the real life actress was named Madge Kendall, which is by an interesting coincidence. It was her theater troupe that John Gielgud, who plays the hospital superintendent in this film, got his start in. So he knew the real Madge Kendall, and she probably never actually met Joseph Merrick. She mailed him a photo, but he had met her husband, who made arrangements for him to go see her in the theater. So and they did have a writing relationship in real life. But again, that scene. As soon as she gives him the peck on the cheek, the scene is over. We don't drill into that. We don't find out what comes next. We don't have a relationship develop because what Lynch is telling us is that for us as voyeurs, these moments are enough. We've done it.
Yes,
We
yes.
had our revelation. But then when in real life, according to both of the books that I read by people who knew the real Joseph Merrick, the last couple of years of his life he spent rather depressed because he couldn't really go anywhere. His mobility was very, very low, and he really wasn't allowed to leave his hospital room more than to wander in a little garden that they made in the back, and he had become extremely lonely, and that was the time actually when he started to build that cathedral, and uh, and so those who think that he committed suicide by trying to lay down in bed, point to that. Those who think that the autopsy was correct and that it actually came as a fall, and then the size of his head made him unable to get up. Just point to the fact that he was his disabilities made falling rather easy. But I think Lynch, without having actual truth in these scenes never happen, actually gives us a better glimpse of what the Elephant Man was going through by cutting away from these scenes, because he has these moments, but he never is able to develop any of these relationships with these people. And the only person he can really talk to as his friend is the doctor, and the doctor is constantly questioning himself whether or not he's just using John slash Joseph for exploitation.
Well, it's only fair that he does that. He needs to. He must. In the same way we criticize or analyze or try to read into applauding at the theater. Um, why this whole euphoria with everybody reading the newspaper about this guy? There's no reason for that, except that we are a sick society who likes to put their noses into things even when we don't like what we're seeing or for whichever crazy reasons. But I think everybody, maybe including Merrick, is in the dilemma of where am I? Like you said, Treves has a lot of difficulties seeing himself as um, for lack of a better word,
A friend, a
as a
friend.
friend, as a good person. He doubts that he's really helping him, but helping himself. He's not sure of why he's doing what he's doing. The same thing with the governor, Gum, I think is his name, the governor of the house. He is. the interesting mixture of an English proper person with arrogance. This very particular combination that he
And
had.
yet he makes the most sense.
Yes, yes. Well,
You're not supposed to like him, but he is the one who says, "Well, if he's an incurable, why are we keeping him here?"
yes, but it keeps going through and through the film in terms of this situation. What is our function, and what are we to do now? And those are two different universes. Our function is to cure people, but if we see a person here that we can help, why, outside of business interests, why should we send them to another place? There's no reasoning for that except keeping the structure that is there for no real reason, except that's how we do it. So, it's ambivalent for everyone, or at least most of the characters.
I wanted to just read in again because people on Facebook can't read the comments. Kathy, when we were talking about the scene with Tree's wife, could it be because beautiful is often used as an adjective to describe women? That's why his mother was used as a representative. And she says that's just her guess. But I think that's a good guess. But then
Well,
we all have mothers, and so all of a sudden we have something we can identify with and with he can read, so we can identify him with him. He recites from something that we pretty much all as people living in Western Christendom know, giving us an identification point. But um, Sila, would this be a good time to talk about the things that Lynch does visually that undercut all of this, that make this as much an exploitation film as it is a human drama?
yes, please. Yeah,
So let's start with the very opening shot. You have that beautiful shot of his mother's eyes, which is a focal point throughout. And this is why I chose now to read Kathy's comment. And she is a very beautiful woman. And then you fade in to the shot of stampeding elephants, which is, I guess, a true story that she, while pregnant with him, um, had a fright involving stampeding elephants. Except, of course, Lynch holds on the shot and almost looks like she's being sexually assaulted by
correct,
elephants,
correct.
going way, way over the top. Interesting story that this and a couple of the other things that I'm going to talk about were things that the financiers got a hold of Mel Brooks after screening the preview of the film and said needed to be edited out. To which Mel Brooks said, no, Lynch made the film that I wanted him to make. We showed you this as a courtesy because we're in a business partnership, but you cannot tell us what we can or what we should and should not put into this film, which is why I think that Lynch was working to make the film that Mel Brooks wanted to make. That and the fact that Brooks Films went on to create The Fly and hired David Cronenberg. This was that Brooks had an understanding that this was the story that he wanted to tell. But then we also have the weird, whether it's a flashback or a dream sequence, when it goes into the eye of his hanging up mask and you see him as an industrial worker, which he did used to make cigars at one point until his illness got in real life. And they're working that bizarre machine, which why I think it might be considered more of a dreamlike scene is because, of course, if it has steam coming out of it. So if steam is operating the machine, why does it also have four men moving it? Because if you have the steam operating it, you don't need the men. If you have the men operating it, you don't need the steam. But it's an awesome looking shot by Freddie Francis, who we talk about so often on here as the cinematographer for The Innocents, and the men turn on him and start beating him. And other than the pure exploitation and kind of cheap emotional draw, what is the point of that scene? You know, what are we supposed to feel any worse for Merrick because he got beaten up in a uh, in a fantasy or a flashback by industrial workers? Is it to make the working class? Is it, and which I can understand if Lynch wants to make that comment, because of course he spent most of his life in Philadelphia, and if you spent any of your time in Philadelphia surrounded by the working class, you might have kind of a negative view of the working class. These are the people who threw snowballs at Santa Claus. All joking aside, um, no, I think he is pointing the finger again back at us. This is what you want to see, right? This is what you came to see. This is what Todd Browning was doing at Universal when he made a film like Freaks. And it leads to my third exploitation scene, a scene that never really happened in real life, but one of my favorite scenes in the film, when after the kidnapping, when Merrick escapes back to the hospital, all of the other freak show people helping him get out. And what a wonder! And of course, the first thing that pops to your mind is Todd Browning and freaks and the freaks with the one of us, because you're surrounded by whatever the politically correct term is, little people, midgets, dwarfs, or what, whatever, someone who I believe is supposed to be a chicken woman. A strong man, and all of your typical classic free. Well, of course, this scene never happened, and yet there's a part of me that says that that scene had to be in there. You know that my brain expected it to be in there, and that it had to be in there, and so. Like that flashback scene, like that opening, this is what you came to see, says Lean. That and we as an audience then have to question ourselves to, uh, for ourselves whether or not we're like the doctor exploiting Joseph/John Merritt.
Well, two points I want to mention, which I think are connected with what you said and what Kathy said. Um, I think the beginning is David Lynch's way of telling the story of what's behind the story, what happened actually. He's basically saying, this is a beautiful woman, and this thing happened to her tragically, the elephant. Um, she's in the fourth month, and we get an elephant out of that. So to me, he's simply giving us a kind of a storyline as to for us to consider, not really to what happened to, for us to consider beauty, accident, ugliness. I mean, I don't think he means it that way, but I think that's one simple way of explaining it. But that is at the same time contrasted by what I understand to be the basis of the film. Besides the fact that there are some things that did not happen to him in real life, the beginning of the film says this is based on the 11, I'm sorry, on the Elephant Man and other reminiscences of Sir Frederick Treves, namely what he wrote. He wrote, and I found that book. He wrote that book about his life, his experiences with the Elephant Man, and is also based in part on the Elephant Man, a study in human dignity by Ashley Montagu. So, and this is the impression. This is one of the reasons I said what I said at the beginning. I think the main purpose of David Lynch is to tell us, which you alluded to also before with the applause, to tell us to criticize humanity, to criticize how we are and how we react to things, and how we are excited to see something ugly, but we need to look away. And when we need to look away, we need to split the finger so we can look a little bit. So, he's really addressing this the crazy humans that we are.
And to continue that, it also says in other true stories, and not the play of the same name, which is throwing a bit of shade. As if to say, this is the true story, not the play. But it is interesting that that a play, a movie, and a book about the Elephant Man all popped up in 1980. um, and people have kind of wrongly said it had something to do with Carter as president of the United States and how people were feeling about the 70s, and that's all bullshit. What it really was that all of these written works had expired in copyright, which is why they call him John Merrick instead of Joseph Merrick, because that was what the doctor called him in his book.
Yes. Yes.
And so they didn't have to worry about someone who wrote a book in 1936 coming out and saying, you infringed my copyright. And they're like, no, because your book was about somebody named Joseph Merrick. Our film was made about a guy named John Merrick, who was the subject of this book that is no longer in copyright. And the play calls him Joseph. And the play actually was the subject of a couple of frivolous lawsuits that the film didn't have to face. But that was why 1980 was kind of the year of the Elephant Man, so to speak, was because, of course, all the people who had died more than 73 years after they'd published their works until their copyrights had expired.
I just wanted to mention, well, one kind of trivial thing, not trivia, but trivial in a way. But I think it. I noticed it today when I was watching the film, and I did not remember it from the first time. Again, in the criticism where he puts the boy, who is a very key figure in the film, for different reasons that we all know. When Dr. Treves comes in for the first time to for the appointment to yeah to meet him and pays him money to be able to see him, uh, the gives him a command, and the boy, I can't remember his name, the boy repeats the command, and then I think the man says, uh, stand up, and the little boy says, stand up, turn around, turn around. This this example of what it means to instruct a young child into showing who's the boss, into showing you are under me, do what I tell you. This level of obedience, I found that very interesting, the way he displayed it in that situation when they were saying that. And and I just wanted to read a very short note on who this person, Ashley Montagu, is. He is the one who wrote The Elephant Man, a study on human dignity, on which the film is also based. Montagu, 1905 to 1999, was a British American anthropologist noted for his works popularizing anthropology and science. He first attracted public attention as the author of UNESCO's Statement on Race in 1950, in which he called for ethnic equality, arguing the race is a social invention with no biological basis. He published this and subsequent versions of Statement on Race, different dates. Montagu also wrote on such varied topics as human evolution, culture, and child care, and possibly his most influential work is The Natural Superiority of Women of 1953. So this guy was uh, doing a lot of very innovative, deep thinking work, which um, Lynch used as part of the basis for his film. So, like I said at the beginning, I think Lynch was really trying to make a very solid statement about the human condition.
Well, and this is typical Lynch because, of course, you can watch something of his and think it's terrible, and then 3 weeks later you're still talking about how terrible it is, and then you're like, wait,
Correct, correct.
wait, did he just? And he did that here too, because you can talk about how horrible it is that the Elephant Man was exploited, but you're watching a film that's an exploitation film about the Elephant and he did that, and which is really interesting because, and I did read up on Montague a little bit, and one of the things that because he published his Elephant Man book in 1971 when he was hard up for cash, and regretted it and just thought it was, and just didn't, it was just something that he did for the money, and considers a lot of his other work a lot more important. And like the UNESCO thing was very, very important because, of course, now it's almost scientific considered fact that there's no such thing as race, that human beings grow up in different parts of the world and evolve different things in terms of melanin, but that race is just a fiction. And he was saying that in 1950, and he came out with this book about the Elephant Man, basically just to pay his bills, and that someone like Lynch would glob onto that and add it to this biopic, which was what the screenplay. I read the original screenplay, and that's literally what it was. It was just a straight up biopic of Joseph Merrick, but um, it is very, very typical. It's another one of those. Wait, did he just? And yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. Because of course, when you write something for the money and you rush through it and it's for publication, you're going to make a lot of errors because you're not putting the kind of work into it deserves, and when Lynch used it as part of his adaptation, he took a lot of the errors and translated them into this film, such as the mean co-partner who beat him, and elements like that. And when it was pointed out to him by the two original screenwriters, he said, "And so," and it's like, "Well, that didn't happen." And he's like, and his answer I love was, "Were you there?"
I have a question. There's the point where um, Joseph Joseph Merrick is going onto the carriage to go back to his owner, not proprietor, and Treves is looking from the window with his friend Fox, another doctor, and he says to Fox, "I pray to God he's an idiot." What do you think he's trying to say with that?
That he doesn't want Joseph to go through what he's actually going through, knowing how hideous he looks to other people, knowing what real society is like, and knowing what he's missing. You know, um, uh, the great part, about being an idiot, so to speak, or which was had a different meaning back then, of course.
Yes, yes.
But imbecility was a phrase that they used. It's actually in a Supreme Court. 3 generations of imbecility is enough. I believe was a famous ruling that allowed for uh, uh, people to actually be sterilized so they wouldn't pass on their imbecility to children. I mean, it was just a different time. But yeah, imbecility would have been an out for him, and that I think is a very deep statement. Again, back to this central theme, which is, would it have made life better for Merrick or for the doctor to not have to realize what this man's life was missing? To realize that this man had a fully working brain and was able to read and write well and had elegant tastes and all of that. I hope he's an idiot. It has two meanings. I hope he's an idiot so he doesn't know what he's missing, and I hope he's an idiot so I don't have to empathize with him one on one as a fellow intelligent human being. And a point that is made, I think, too often in this film, honestly. And if it has a flaw, I think it's that it hammers this home too often, that I can exploit for my own purposes. Because, of course, he only starts to question whether or not it's right to have him as a experiment to show him off, once he realizes that he's actually an intelligent human being. And one of the poorer ways that this is emphasized is, of course, he refers to Joseph slash John as it until that scene where he starts reciting, "The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want, and though I want," uh, and then from then on, it's him. Which, like I said, I think two on the nose, two over the head. David, you made your point, and it keeps going and going and going, and then he actually turns to another character and says, "Am I just exploiting this guy?" And at that point, you're like, um, uh, David, uh, that you're not good at subtlety. Yeah, that is for sure. But he never was. Even his greatest films, no one would call good at making a subtle point. But that is the major theme of the film, and you picked on the right line because, of course, that cross meaning. Who is it better for if he's an imbecile?
Well,
Joseph or society at large?
the way I understood, the way I read that sentence, I pray to God he's an idiot, is I hope he is unaware of his suffering. But, but I find that possibility as very difficult because the most retarded individual is able to react on emotions when they feel hurt, when they feel disrespected, when they feel abused. So it does not matter how much of an idiot, how much of an imbecile a person could be. The person will always have an essence to capture when they're being mistreated, loved, or anything else. So I find this statement really off the wall. It doesn't
Again,
belong there.
who is it better for? Him as no, I hope to God he's an idiot, is, you know because Joseph Merrick's life would be better if he was an idiot. Absolutely not.
I think
My
he's
life
referring to him. I think he's
My
referring.
life will be better if Joseph Merrick's an idiot because I don't have to empathize with him one on one, you know,
Yeah,
and
that's
I
a
don't
point.
have to be aware of his deformities and how they affect him because he can't tell me, you
Yeah,
know.
I take Treves for being a caring individual. That's the way I read the character, and for that reason, I really believe that he's referring to Merrick himself. I hope he's an idiot for his own sake, so that he doesn't have to suffer as much under the attack of society.
Well, and but I don't think it's out of character for him to say that as a caring individual, but he is expressing what the audience feels too at that point. You know, I hope I don't have to deal with and it and Lynch again won't let us off the hook because of course he spends 45 minutes of this film with us and Merrick appreciating him one on one and giving him intellectual force and intellectual heft. And we're again we're not allowed to just be the empty voyeur without asking ourselves, hey, are we exploiting this fellow as well? And then at the end, we have to give ourselves a round of applause for because we're not giving him a round of applause for having normal intelligence, being able to read and write. We don't applaud people for that. We're not giving him a round of applause for being born, or not born, having a severe disability and being deformed. We don't applaud people for that. What are we applaud? We're not applauding him. We're applauding ourselves for how we react to him.
Well, yes, I agree with that 100%. This is the only clear uh, result for me from that applause. But to your other point in terms of for whom, for Merrick himself, that applause is for himself. He doesn't he doesn't read it that way. He doesn't recognize the arrogance of society applauding themselves for being able to love him. He feels from a very early point on, why is everybody being so nice to me? Even though he does not really, in a way, he's not really that surprised because he has acknowledged that he's a person, not an animal. So he knows he deserves better. But in during that applause, I see him in many situations, not only there, really enjoying this, and that's a point of confusion, which is I didn't really focus too much on the mistakes of the film, but for me that's also another mistake in the film when Governor Crumb or Gum comes for the first time in for the interview, and to several questions he says, "They are also kind to me." But that response does not equate to his level of intelligence. So why is he answering such a silly answer where he knows that doesn't belong there? So I
Because
found that a little.
that's what Treves trained him to say. Remember, he's been rehearsed at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
Everything that he comes out of his mouth,
But Eric,
Treves told
yes,
him to say.
yes, okay. But and that's again this dualism between what I'm supposed to do and what I am. Yes, he obeys by repeating the question out of order or out of context. But once Governor Gum leaves the room, why does he continue to recite the 23rd Psalm? Because he knows he's going to make an impression.
or he just does. Maybe he seems to be a very religious man. You
Yeah,
know,
but
and
but
maybe
when they
he's entrapped by the beauty of the words.
yes, but when they walk in after they left, they walk back in, and he's still reciting the end of it. You could see his pride telling them,
Yeah,
and
you're
then he
right.
answers the
Yeah, you're right.
question,
The way,
how did you know that? There's a certain pride in there. So there's a duality of I'm playing
but
dumb, and then I'm going to hit them.
no, no, you're absolutely right because he's a showman, right? That's what he is.
Yes,
That's what he's
he's
been.
very fine. He's very refined.
He is he is a showman. That's has been his whole life.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, not his whole life, but that's been what however long he's been with the so-called freak show. So yeah, so yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Uh, but where I think it is a flaw is how unconvincing he is giving the rehearsed answers that the doctor
Yes,
gives
yes,
him to say. I think that's a flaw because, of course, the Merrick that we come to know is much more intelligent than that, and he would have known
correct.
how artificial and rehearsed that would have sounded. It's a scene that in the moment works, but then on reflection, yeah, absolutely, you're right. That's a flaw.
But the acting, I really enjoyed it. The head nurse with her authoritarian air at the beginning, so
Oh,
you heard what the doctor said. Follow him.
Wendy Hiller, and when she knocks out that orderly, the one that's been bringing people in to see him in charging, it's just a
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful scene. And I love Wendy Hiller so much. I
Yes.
don't know if we've used her,
Yes.
but so many of these people have been in other films that we've done. John Hurt in A Man for All Seasons. John Gielgud in God. So many Beckett, Our Man from Havana. I mean, I'm sure we've done something with Wendy Hiller. The Anne Bancroft is as Madge Kimball or Kendall. I think got the role because she was married to Mel Brooks. To be honest,
Oh,
she's
okay.
not anything special in this film, but it seemed like more of a the cameo that you give the producer's wife.
Anthony Hopkins, I think, in a way, he's typical Anthony Hopkins. That he does that all the time in every film. That's what he does. But I like him. I like him in that role very much.
And untalked about, but because he would become a very good character actor later is Dexter Fletcher as the Bites boy. But first of all, as you pointed out, a very central character to this, and
Yes.
you have
Yes.
that wonderful scene. But what a great performance! What a wonderful performance when he was there. And he would go on. I think people know him a lot more for what he does on television, but he would go on to do um, uh, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and have a very big part. But I think people know him more for Hotel Babylon and Band of Brothers and things like that. And but he became a director himself, and he actually was the guy who replaced Brian Singer to direct. I think it was a horrible movie, Bohemian Rhapsody. But in 2015, he made a film I absolutely love, an under seen gem called Eddie the Eagle that I highly recommend. But yeah, he is great in this film. But it's very interesting because Hopkins tried to get Lynch fired from this film on his first week because Lynch showed up and he wanted to do everything. He wanted to do the makeup himself. He wanted to do the sound design himself. He did turn the photography over to Freddie Francis, but that's because he trusted Francis. Uh, because Francis had been a director. He directed those horror films for Amicus and Hammer Horror, and also because he's Freddie fucking Francis, the guy who shot so many of the great films that we talk about all of the time. But And Lynch had a lot of on the job training to do as far as gaining the actor's trust. And so, but he also had to learn because he'd made only Eraserhead, which he'd made basically himself and done pretty much everything, that you had to learn how to trust the makeup artist to do your vision. And Hopkins was like, this guy has absolutely no idea what he's doing, and we're never going to get this film done. And I'm going to spend years on a set. And he went to Mel Brooks, and Mel Brooks said, "No, that's the guy. I'll fire you before I'll fire him because that's the guy who I want to make this film." Which is again why I think Brooks literally shared that same vision, and I think Lynch made the film that Brooks wanted made.
Did you see any filming or any video of David Bowie in the play?
I haven't. Is there video of him
I
in the?
don't
I
know.
know he does.
I don't know.
I've never seen. I know he did it without makeup, and I've seen the Elephant Man play, and they do it without makeup. I saw it with oh, what's his name, Bradley Cooper, back in, I think it was 2012. I got to see it in New York. Yeah, it was Bradley Cooper played the elephant, and he does, and they do it without out makeup, and they usually cast a rather handsome. Not, I think finding someone as beautiful as David Bowie didn't happen quite that often because there really aren't that many people. But they find an attractive man to play the Elephant Man and let your imagination take control. So, and I would love to find video of it. But yeah, but unlike that version of the ruling class he was supposedly in that turned out to be a satire, this really exists. David Bowie did play him on Broadway and was nominated for a Tony for it.
He was nominated for what?
Tony Award
In which for which work?
for the Elephant Man.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Not for Absolute Beginners, that's for damn sure.
No, I think he would have. I'm sure he did a very good job because I know him playing an ugly person from Baal by Bertolt Brecht, and he does a very good job. He's not only makeup, but he knows he's a I think he's a born actor, and I think he would do that. Somehow in the back of my head, I have the impression I saw some shots of him doing the play, and I imagine outside of that, he would be able to do that because
I've
he,
seen,
he knows how to do it.
I've seen pictures. I've seen stills that they used, of him, and they're all shots of him in a bathtub surrounded by
Correct,
nurses
correct.
with no makeup on, and that's all I've seen. But I've not never seen an actual video of a. I don't know if it was ever recorded even because they just didn't do that back then, because they actually, I know that sounds weird now, but they actually thought that if a video escaped, people wouldn't go see the play, which is
Oh yeah.
ridiculous. Of course, we now know the best thing you can do is have a video because that's what gets people to go see it. But they didn't know what they were fucking doing back then. But then, do we know what the fuck we're doing now?
I cannot say no because that would mean that I know that we don't know.
Ah, yes, it is. It's an eternal trap. Well, anyway, I've run out of my notes on this. So, anything else that you want to talk about? But those were all the notes that I made on this particular viewing.
No, I think I covered all my notes as well. Yeah, yeah. That I think that's. I'm just going to. I would just repeat myself, trying to explain what I already explained. But I think it was a great film. I still think I need to see it again at least once because there are certain things that I grasp now even better after this room. So especially when he gets mugged, um, when he's traveling on that boat. Um, there are a couple of things that I'm trying to readjust in my head, including the short statement from I hope to God he's an idiot. There's a couple of things I want to revisit, so I'm not finished with it yet.
Excellent. Well, and of course, I've been my first viewing of this film was in 1980, so that's a lot of my life that has been influenced by the Elephant Man. But I do want to kind of finish off just with a note on. Oh, hang on, just a moment. There's a car starting. I do want to make a note that Lynch's influences, such as the Kenneth Anger, like Scorpio Rising, and the queer exploitation films of the 1960s and 70s that he puts to work here, are something that I rather enjoy. And so when somebody comes to me or when a critic like Roger Ebert, for instance, says, "Well, gosh, you know, wasn't the Elephant Man really kind of tacky, given and ableist, and given the subject matter, and wasn't that a tacky thing for David Lynch to make a film in that manner?" My answer is yes, and that's what's so fucking brilliant about it. And I think that's the note that I'll end on. Other than that, do we want to do some scheduling notes? Do you have anything you want to plug before I talk about what we're doing next week?
Well, no, I'll just mention the diving into Gustav Mahler's Third Symphony, which will be starting tomorrow. And outside of that, I'll just go to my notes very quickly here because was not prepared for this. Uh, here, here we go. So yeah, there are a few composers, including Prokofiev on the 23rd and Shakespeare on the 26th. But on a very light note, I'm also doing Barbara Streisand and Ella Fitzgerald on the 24th and 25th. Those are their birthdays. So we have some good music to listen to in the next week or so.
Excellent. And then on the 25th, so next Thursday, we're going to celebrate Shakespeare's birthday. We're doing the Orson Welles film from 1965, Chimes at Midnight, which also has John Gielgud in it. Interestingly enough, as Henry IV, and this was Shakespeare's Henry IV parts uh, 1 and 2, with certain scenes from the Merry Wives of Windsor, Richard the Second, and uh, uh, Henry the Fifth put in and telescoped through the character of John Falstaff, who was the comic relief in those plays. And so that'll be next week, Chimes at Midnight. Before that, though, on Tuesday, we're going to continue it's at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in the same UK cinema history. We're going to continue talking about the new Amazon series, um, Fallout, based on the popular role playing game. This time, though, we're going to have spoilers so that we can talk openly. We had a very good room last Tuesday on Fallout, but there were people in it who'd only seen the first or second episode and hadn't watched the series all the way through, even though it's available. And so we had to be careful about spoilers. This is going to be a spoilers episode, and that's Tuesday at 5 p.m. for Fallout, Thursday at 5 p.m. Orson Welles' Chimes at Midnight, also known as Falstaff. And other than that, I just want to first take an opportunity to thank Kathy, who is just one of Sila's best supporters, and she's also a great help here at UK cinema history. Yet again, she shared the room on social media, and we love you for it, Kathy. And every time we see you here, it fills our heart because we appreciate you so much. If you can share this with your friends, we know we are an acquired taste, and I'm speaking mostly to the people who are listening on Facebook, but we'd like more people to acquire it, so let other people know about us. But I'd also like to thank the reigning members of our audience, Sally, Aiden, and our good friend Dominic, who, ironically, we met the last time we did a Shakespeare film when we did King Lear, and Dominic had a lot of intelligent things to say. So I do hope you can join us and be part of the discussion next week when we discuss Shakespeare in Chimes at Midnight. Other than that, unless you have anything else, I'm going to end the room and wish everybody a good night.
Did you say Shakespeare on the 26th?
No, unfortunately, it's the 25th. It's the day before his birthday because we schedule on Thursdays.
Okay.
But I came as close as I possibly could.
No, I'm just double checking because of my scheduling, because I have Prokofiev for that Tuesday, but I'll just push it an hour to the front or to the back. Okay.
Yeah,
I was just double
yeah,
checking.
no. Tuesday is Fallout, which you can come to or not, but it has its own own thing. But Thursday, I definitely would like you here for Chimes at Midnight, Sila,
All right.
because that's much more up your alley, shall we say?
No, I'm in Shakespeare mood right now, so that's fine.
Excellent, excellent. So yeah, we'll see you next Thursday, and hopefully we'll see some of you Tuesday, but we'll see all of you on Thursday for Chimes at Midnight. And other than that, I'm ending the room in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Want to join the conversation? Follow the link in the episode description. Every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you can be a part of one of our recordings. You'll also see the films that we have scheduled for the next couple of months. And while you're listening, take a minute to subscribe to the podcast and give us a rating and write a review for us either on Spotify or Apple Podcast. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to UK Cinema History.